Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we need to talk about follow-up baits. I've got three baits here that I'm going to show you that I think are some of the best for when you have that situation where you're throwing a reaction bait, you know, maybe it's a topwater, a swim jig, whatever it is, but that fish ends up swirling on it and missing it, or you know, just getting it barely, and then you go to set the hook and the bait comes flying back at you. What do you throw back at those fish? Because I've found that there are certain times you can cast back the same presentation and get that bite, but I would say that probably 7 times out of 10 you're more likely to catch that fish that missed that bait if you throw a more slow-moving, finesse-y presentation back at them instead of throwing the same presentation. So like if I'm throwing a poppin' frog, for instance, you know, and I have a fish that comes up and misses it, I'm less likely to catch that fish just throwing the poppin' frog back out there as I am to throw something that stays in the strike zone a little bit longer and maybe sinks down to those fish. There's a reason why those fish miss the bait in the first place. It may be because their mood is just such that they really don't want to chase a moving bait and they need something a little bit slower. So once those fish show themselves, these are 3 different techniques that you need to have on hand to follow up with. And the very first one is probably the absolute best. It's the most high percentage follow-up bait. If it's a suitable type situation where the cover is light enough and you're not worried about getting snagged every cast, this is going to be the one that probably catches those fish. Like, I'm talking like super high percentage. 9 times out of 10 probably isn't even the ratio. It's probably something like 19 times out of 20 you'll get bit with this, and that is a Wacky rigged stick bait. Okay, this is the Z-Man Zinkers. This is a good stick bait to Wacky rig, and essentially, you know, it's just that really simple finesse presentation. Sorry if you're getting a little bit of wind noise here, but finesse presentation that has a nice little shimmying glide down to the bottom, and so if you cast this back to a fish that missed a bait, it's probably going to eat this thing. Okay, and I'll either fish the Wacky rig with an open style Wacky rig hook like the WRM 201 from Hayabusa, or I might fish it with the modified 201, the 201 FG that has the fluorocarbon brush guard on it. But in general, a Wacky rig is going to be the best follow-up bait for clear water, more isolated, thin cover. So if you're just casting to the outside of cover, or you're skipping underneath docks, those sort of things, it's going to be the best one. It's going to be the one that you want to have tied on. However, if it's slightly thicker cover, maybe you have like real laydowns with like a lot of branches on it, that's when you want to have a presentation that has a similar fall, maybe not exactly the same fall, but it's very similar as far as the overall presentation to the Wacky rig, but is a little bit more weedless. And so I like to use, and this is kind of a new presentation, I like to use the Ozark rig. So the Ozark rig is essentially a Texas rig presentation without like a bullet style weight. It's essentially a jig head from Core Tackle that's got this evenly dispersed weight on the shank of this hook, and it allows this bait to have a nice glide like a Wacky rig can have as well. However, you can rig it perfectly weedless, so it's very efficient in thicker cover than a Wacky rig. And so, you know, if it's bushes or vegetation and I get a fish to miss a bait, I might be throwing the Ozark rig back because it's just a little bit more efficient. But because of that glide, I really think that glide gets a lot of bites from those fish that miss baits. So the Ozark rig is another really good one, especially for thicker cover. However, if I'm fishing around real thick cover, and say I'm throwing the poppin' frog a little bit, and I get a big fish to come up on the poppin' frog, and it's around real thick vegetation. There's just not enough room, not enough open water for the Wacky rig to glide down or shimmy down, or the Ozark rig to glide into where the fish was. I need something that's a little bit more vertical presentation to punch through, and that's really weedless. And so I'll have a traditional Texas rig rigged up with like heavy line. This is like 25-pound test, but you know, 20-pound test, 25-pound test. But this is Seaguar Tatsu. And so essentially I'm just looking for something that is real heavy tackle, and you could use braid if it's real thick vegetation, but a more you know, weedless vertical presentation, that's what I'm looking for. And I like to use the Z-Man palmetto bugs, and I really think that Z-Man baits, the Elastec baits, are well suited as follow-up baits for this type of situation, because when you pitch in there, you want to keep the bait in the strike zone for a long period of time, because a lot of time when a fish hits, especially during the spring, and it misses a bait, I would say there's a good chance that fish was on the bed, and so you need to stay in that strike zone longer, you know, keep it on the bed longer. So I like the Elastec because it floats up, and so I can just drag it real slow and it'll kind of float up and be real tantalizing with those pinchers or claws or paddles, you know, sticking up. So anyways, Texas rig is just a good traditional follow-up bait, especially if you're fishing around really thick cover where you need more of a vertical drop to drop right through that cover. So anyways, guys, I guess the whole point about this video is to remind you that if you're fishing any type of moving bait that the fish may miss, it's really important to immediately put down that bait that you got the miss on most of the time, and pick up one of these 3 different follow-up baits. These are absolutely proven. They're awesome follow-up baits, and they usually will get the bite. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you have any follow-up baits that you like to throw at fish that miss baits in the comment section below. And also, if you have any topics you want me to cover in a future video, I definitely want to hear about it. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button and use those affiliate links in the description below. I'm going to have all the tackle that I use with these 3 baits that I talked about in the description. And other than that, make sure that you trust the process. I'm going to see you out on the water.